Ryan here has a super chat. Hi, Anthony. Great debate. How do we know the Jews believed God is multi-personal? Are there Talmudic writings on this? Now, so here's something, just tell me I'm not magnanimous when I tell you this. So before my debate with Dale, okay, originally I was thinking, because I've done this in other debates, I like to lay an Old Testament foundation. And I did talk about the Old Testament, but not about this aspect of it. But I like to lay an Old Testament foundation because the New Testament is not saying things in a vacuum, right? It's drawing on and claims to be the fulfillment of the Old Testament. So that's the background context within which you're supposed to read it and in terms of which you're supposed to approach it. So in other debates, I know that Unitarians are going to go into the debate with Unitarian assumptions. They're going to say the Jews were Unitarians. They thought God was one person. And therefore, the New Testament can't be saying that Jesus is God if the Father is God. So I usually try to take that argument away from them before the debate even really gets underway. And I do that by going to the Old Testament and showing that the Old Testament teaches a plurality of divine persons. For example, it uses plural pronouns, plural verbs, plural adjectives for God. For example, it's not just the case that God is referred to as he and him or refers to himself as I, me, and my, but God speaks in the plural and is spoken about in the plural. God also refers to himself as us and our in Genesis 1:26, 3:22, 11:7, Isaiah 6:8. God is referred to as they and them in passages like Genesis 20:13 in the literal Hebrew, where it says of God in relation to Abraham, it says they caused him to wander, right? God is called they. They caused him to wander. Genesis 35:7, referring to the incident back at Bethel, God tells Jacob to go to Bethel, the place where they revealed themselves to you, meaning God. It's talking about God in the context. So God is called us, our, and they and them. And there are numerous other passages that do this. You have passages that make a subject-object distinction between the Lord and somebody else called the Lord. Genesis 19:24, the Lord rained fire and brimstone from the Lord out of heaven. The Lord from the Lord. In the Hebrew, I mean, it's just undeniable. Right? It uses the the direct object marker. So it's showing a subject-object distinction in Hebrew. The Lord from the Lord, right? The Lord reigned from the Lord. So now how is this all relevant? There's so much more Old Testament evidence. But when you look at Jewish literature interacting with this material, they all interpret it in ways that flow right into the New Testament. Okay. Prior to the Talmud, you had the Targums. Okay, the Talmud is post-Christian. It's post-apostolic. It reflects Jewish reactions to things like the coming of Christ, the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Israel altogether in the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 2nd century. So the Talmud's reflecting Jews looking back at all of this and trying to come to terms with it. But the Targums represent earlier Jewish interpretations and paraphrases of the Old Testament. When you look at the Targums, they repeatedly referred to this other person called the Lord as God's Memra, which means in Hebrew, Dabar, which means in Greek, Logos, which means in English, Word. Okay, so repeatedly they say that God did something from the Word or by the Word, right? So for example, Genesis 19:24 in the Targum says that it was the word of the Lord who appeared on earth to Abraham, and that it was the word of the Lord who rained down fire and brimstone from the Lord out of heaven, right? In Genesis 1:26, Targum Neophiti says, when God said, let us make man, that it was the word who is imbued there as one of those persons, and his Shekinah, his glory, his spirit. And it literally says in Genesis 2:1, Targum Neophiti, it says, when they completed the creation of heaven and earth, they, right? Who's they? Contextually, it's referring back to chapter 1, where it says that God, his word, and his Shekinah, his glory, Shekinah is how most people say it, but Shekinah in Hebrew, his Shekinah is one of those persons who is addressed along with his word. So when you look at what Jewish scholars say about all of this, Jewish scholars, mind you, I mean, I could pull books off the shelf, book after book. Dale thinks this is fringe scholarship. Dale has no clue what represents mainstream scholarship. This is a book written by Alan Segal called Two Powers in Heaven. And what he points out in this book is that throughout the Talmud, okay, not the Targums, the Talmud, what you see are Jews trying to deal with these two powers texts where there seems to be more than one divine person. Okay, so he's dealing with post-Christian Jewish reactions to this. How do we account for this? And one of the things you see here, even as dealt with by Segal, is the fact that this position was even held by foremost Jewish rabbis like Rabbi Akiva. Okay, Rabbi Akiva was a foremost Tannaitic rabbi. Tannaitic means the earliest stratum of rabbis represented in the Talmud. Okay, Rabbi Akiva at one point is accused of holding this heresy by these later Jews. Okay, so this represents a debate among post-Christian Jews, not just a debate between one Jew and another or certain Jewish groups, not just a debate between Jews and non-Jews. It's an inter-Jewish debate. Okay, Jews were debating this thing among themselves. Now, Daniel Boyarin is another Jewish scholar. He is a Talmudic scholar. He's a professor, Actually, so I'll read the whole thing here. He is the Herman P. and Sophia Taubman Professor of Talmudic Culture in the Department of Near Eastern Studies and Rhetoric at the University of California, Berkeley. Okay, so here he is, a Talmudic scholar, and not just in the Talmud. I mean, his scholarship ranges beyond that. He has a book here called Borderlines. He also has numerous articles published in such standard scholarly journals as the Harvard Theological Review, where he has things like articles like the Gospel of the Memra, right? He has, and he makes comments where he says, for example, I mean, I could just turn to the book and pick out comments where he says things like, let me just find you a juicy quote here real quick. He says, with respect to the Memra as a second divine person, he says, this version, meaning belief in the Lord and his word as a divine person, this version of monotheistic theology was the popular view among Jews in the Second Temple period. Okay, so now not only is this not fringe scholarship, these guys are standard scholars in the field, writing in standard theological journals, reputable theological publications as well that have, been widely received, even if some people want to debate them. But this was also the pervasive view throughout Palestine and the diaspora that Jewish people held. Remember, the Targums, the pre-Talmudic Targums, represent popular Judaism. They represent what was being taught in the synagogues, right? The Targums, for those that don't know the background here, the Targums are what happened was the Jews, as a result of being taken into exile into Babylon, right? Remember, when the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, numerous Jews are being taken off into captivity. And as a result of that, they come to learn Aramaic. That's why significant portions of the book of Daniel are in Aramaic, because Daniel lives in Babylon. Remember, he's one of the captives who's taken off to Babylon. And so portions of the book are written in Aramaic. So later Jews came to have that as their vernacular language. And so in the synagogue, it was often the case that when a person, the reader, read a portion of the Torah in Hebrew, they always had to read it in Hebrew, but then it would be interpreted into Aramaic for the benefit of people for whom that was a more familiar language. Okay, I'm not saying people didn't know Hebrew. I mean, it's certainly the case that the rabbi had to know Hebrew, but a lot of people would have just spoken Aramaic, and so this sort of thing was to facilitate understanding. And I only pulled 2 books off the shelf, by the way. Oh, but my point is, this was what was being read or used in the synagogue in the first century. But here's another book. And notice, so I mean, this book is written by Moshe Idel, again, another Jew, the Max Cooper Professor of Jewish Theology at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, right? So none of these guys are Christian. And this book won the National Jewish Book Award, right? You're going to tell me this is fringe scholarship? Moshe Edel, the Max Cooper Professor of Jewish Thought at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, who won the National Jewish Book Award, that he's giving you fringe scholarship, right? In this book, notice what the book is called: Ben, Sonship and Jewish Mysticism. What he's talking about in here is this notion among Jews, even after the time of Jesus, in certain para-rabbinic circles, who refused to shake off some of these earlier Jewish teachings, and so taught not only that God is Father, but that God has a divine Son. Right? There's more going on in the book, but I'm just saying, I mean, this is among the things that he's pointing out in the book. So this isn't fringe scholarship. Rather, this is scholarship that exposes the ignorance of a wannabe scholar, Dale Tuggy, right? Dale Tuggy is not a biblical scholar. He has no competence in the biblical languages. He has no proficiency in biblical studies. So, I mean, it's audacious to me. That's what gets me worked up. It's audacious that this guy wants to pretend that he speaks for scholarship. He doesn't. And again, I mean, I said this in the debate, but if somebody wants to keep saying, that they know what the scholars teach and they're just teaching what the scholars are teaching, well, then he shouldn't have had a problem giving me the evidence from the scholars, right?